On the night of the awards gala, Chelsea Whitmore lifted the gold trophy above her head just as the giant screen behind her flickered to life. The applause had not yet died when the surveillance footage began to play, footage from 3 years ago, recorded in the hours before the fire. Her laughter exploded from the speakers, sharp and bright and utterly unmistakable. Every person in the ballroom looked up at once. On the screen, Chelsea Whitmore stood at the entrance to Kira Sterling's studio, a gasoline canister swinging from her hand. She unscrewed the cap while humming a tune, light and carefree, as if she were heading out for a picnic. She poured the gasoline with unhurried deliberation, from the doorstep to the windowsill, from the windowsill to the exhaust pipe along the base of the wall. Then she stepped back, pulled out a lighter, and flicked the flame into the waiting trail of fuel. Fire galloped up the studio walls, devouring everything in its path. Chelsea stood before the blaze, raised her phone, and recorded a video. She spoke one line into the camera, and her voice, amplified by the ballroom's sound system, reached every corner of the hall. "Kira, I've burned it all down for you. Every last piece." On stage, Chelsea hurled the gold trophy to the floor. The crystal shattered into 3 pieces. One of them skittered across the stage and came to rest against the host's shoe. The host's microphone was still live. The sharp intake of breath it caught echoed through the ballroom like a low, rolling thunder. "Turn it off. Turn it off right now." Chelsea spun toward the backstage, but her heel caught the train of her own gown, and she pitched forward. She caught herself on her hands, and 3 of her acrylic nails snapped clean off. 300 guests from the jewelry industry sat in silence. Not a single person moved to help her. She knelt at the edge of the stage and lifted her head, her gaze snapping to the center seat of the front row. William Whitmore sat there in an Armani suit, a burgundy red tie knotted at his throat. At that moment, the tie looked like a noose, cinched so tight he could barely breathe. His lips were moving, but no sound came. His fingers dug into the armrests of his chair, his knuckles the gray-white of a corpse. Chelsea's mouth opened. She wanted to cry out, "Dad." The syllable never left her lips. All 4 giant screens around the ballroom switched simultaneously to a new image. No longer the surveillance footage. Documents now, pages turning one after another. The first document, a police incident report. 3 years ago, on the night of November 19th, a fire broke out in a converted warehouse studio on North Zhongshan Road. The caller was a homeless man. Response time, 23:14. A handwritten note in the margin read, "Gasoline residue found at scene. Preliminary assessment, arson." The second document, the fire department's investigation report. Point of origin was the south entrance of the studio. The accelerant was 92-octane gasoline, an exact match to the fuel grade used by the Whitmore Jewelry Group's logistics fleet. The third document, the fleet's refueling records. At 3 p.m. the day before the fire, Chelsea Whitmore's personal assistant had used a company fuel card to purchase 40 liters of 92-octane gasoline at a gas station on North Zhongshan Road. The surveillance photo was pinned to the corner of the document. The face in the photo was unmistakable, Chelsea's assistant, carrying 2 20-liter gasoline canisters. The fourth document, hospital records. Patient, Kira Sterling. 2nd to 3rd degree burns on the face. Severed extensor tendons in the right hand. Admitted with no money. Emergency contact, none. The 5th document, an email. Sender, William Whitmore. Recipient, Whitmore Jewelry Group Legal Director. The email consisted of a single sentence, bolded and in black. "Bury this. Whatever it costs." The documents stopped flipping. The screen froze on a final line of red text. All of the above evidence has been simultaneously submitted to the International Jewelry Design Arbitration Committee and law enforcement. Case number 0623. The formal review proceedings were initiated at 9 a.m. this morning. The main doors swung open. 2 columns of uniformed officers strode into the ballroom. The lead officer stopped in front of William Whitmore and held up a document bearing an official red seal. His voice, picked up by the microphone, carried through the entire hall. "Mr. William Whitmore, Ms. Chelsea Whitmore, you are hereby detained on suspicion of arson, malicious prosecution, and trade secret infringement. Please cooperate with the investigation." Chelsea scrambled to her feet. One of her false eyelashes had detached and dangled from the corner of her eye. She grabbed her father's sleeve, her voice splintering into a shriek. "Dad, say something. You're the vice chairman of the association. You know everyone." William Whitmore said nothing. His gaze had drifted past his daughter's shoulder toward the rear entrance of the ballroom. A woman stood there, a black skirt suit. The scar on her right cheek was fully visible under the chandelier light. On the ring finger of her left hand, she wore a plain gold peony ring, and a faint, faded scar traced its way from beneath her sleeve to the edge of her wrist. Beside her stood 3 people in lawyers' robes. One of them, a gray-haired woman, was speaking quietly into her ear. The woman listened, nodded, and then lifted her eyes. Her gaze traveled across the 300 industry guests, across Chelsea Whitmore kneeling on the floor, across William Whitmore's ashen face, and came to rest on the shattered crystal trophy lying on the stage. She looked at it for only a moment. Then she turned and walked out. The sound of her heels on the marble floor was unhurried, each step as steady as a metronome. Her silhouette vanished into the light beyond the ballroom doors. Someone raised a phone and snapped a photo of her retreating figure. Within 15 minutes, that photo was the #1 trending topic across every platform. The hashtag read, #Kira Sterling returns. The woman who, 3 years ago, had been blacklisted by Whitmore Jewelry, branded a discredited debtor by the courts, and reduced to scavenging discarded chicken bones outside a fast food joint in a migrant worker slum, had come back. Rewind to the autumn 3 years earlier. The day Kira Sterling walked out of the detention center, a fine, cold drizzle was falling. She had spent 15 days inside. She had lost 12 pounds. Her eyes had sunk into deep hollows, her cheekbones jutted sharply, and her whole body seemed put together from pieces that had been snapped and then hastily glued back. She stood at the gate in a borrowed coat, $17 in her pocket. No one had come to pick her up. Lucas Cross's phone number had been disconnected. Chelsea Whitmore had blocked her on every social media account. The property management had confiscated the keys to her studio. All her bank cards had been frozen. She stood at the curb and waited 30 minutes for a bus. When it arrived, she realized $17 wasn't enough to cover the fare to the slum on the city's edge. The driver glanced at her face. The sutures hadn't been removed yet. The gauze wrapped from the corner of her right eye down to her jaw, seeping a faint yellowish fluid. The driver looked away and waved her aboard without a word. She got off in the slum and walked along a street she had never seen before. The buildings on either side were jammed together like crooked teeth, wires spiderwebbing overhead, condensation from air conditioner units dripping into dark puddles on the ground. She walked for an hour. She knocked on the doors of 7 different shops and asked if they were hiring. No one wanted her. The gauze on her face was too frightening. Her right hand was still in a cast. She couldn't even carry a tray. When she reached a fast food joint and smelled frying chicken, her stomach seized with a hunger so violent it nearly doubled her over. She stood in the doorway and watched the people inside eat. 1 minute, 2, 3. Then she crouched down and picked up a chicken bone someone had left on the ground, still clinging to a few shreds of meat. That was how Auntie Marge first saw her. A plump, middle-aged woman who had opened this little restaurant after her divorce, her apron stained with grease, her hair pulled back in a careless ponytail, her eyelids slightly swollen from too many late nights over the deep fryer. She was carrying a fresh tray of fried chicken out from the kitchen when she spotted the figure crouched in the doorway. She stopped. She set the chicken down on a customer's table. Then she walked back into the kitchen, ladled out a bowl of hot congee, and topped it with 2 poached eggs. The whites had set into tender, perfect circles. The yolks were still molten. She carried the bowl to the door, crouched down, and set it on the ground in front of Kira. "Eat. No charge." Kira lifted her head. Auntie Marge saw the fluid seeping through the gauze, the hollowed-out eyes, the scars peeking out from the edge of the cast on her wrist. She didn't ask a single question. She just nudged the bowl forward. Kira picked up the bowl and ate, spoon in her left hand. She ate slowly, not wolfing the food down, but with a strange, almost fragile deliberation, as if she was afraid the bowl might vanish at any moment. When she reached the second egg, her tears began to fall into the congee. She made no sound. She just kept eating. Auntie Marge crouched beside her and watched her finish. Then she said, "There's a storage room upstairs. 6 square meters. You can stay. $350 a month. Meals included." That was how Kira Sterling stayed at the fast food joint. She learned to fry chicken with her left hand, to chop vegetables left-handed, to mop the floor, to wash dishes, all left-handed. Her right hand was useless, but her left hand could keep her alive. Annie Marge never asked what she used to do, or how she'd gotten the scars on her face. She just left a tube of ointment on the stove every morning before Kira's shift. Every so often, she'd simmer a pot of pork rib soup and leave it outside Kira's door. At New Year's, she bought Kira a new down coat. The price tag had been snipped off, but Kira found the receipt in the pocket for $190. Half a month's profit for Annie Marge. In the deep quiet of the nights, Kira would sit in that 6-square-meter storage room and pull out the notebooks she kept hidden under her bed. Inside them were the designs she was redrawing with her left hand. The lines were wobbly and crooked, like a child's scribbles compared to the fluid, flawless drafts her right hand had once produced. But she drew every night. When one notebook was full, she bought another. It took her 3 months to fill the first one. The lines shook like seismograph readings. The third notebook took 2 months, and the lines began to steady. By the 7th notebook, finished in a single month, her hand could mostly control the pen's direction. Halfway through the 12th notebook, she drew a complete peony, 72 petals, every curve landing exactly where she wanted it. She stared at that flower until dawn, then opened the 13th notebook and started again from the beginning. She never gave up. Not because she was strong, because she had no other choice. There was nothing behind her. Her mother had died young. Her father had been hidden away in an unlicensed nursing home by her stepmother, Gloria Harper. The man she was supposed to marry had chosen the woman she hated most. Her designs had been stolen. Her reputation had been destroyed. Her face had been scarred. Her right hand had nearly been crippled. She had no home to return to, no money to spend, no shoulder to lean on. All she had was a 6-square-meter storage room, a buzzing fluorescent bulb, and 17 notebooks filled with crooked left-handed sketches. But that was enough. Enough to keep her alive. Enough to make her stronger, slowly. Her right hand wasn't truly beyond repair. The University Hospital in Heidelberg, Germany, had a specialized nerve reconstruction surgery, a procedure specifically designed to restore function after extensor tendon rupture. She discovered this at 3 a.m, the glow of her phone screen the only light in the storage room. She stared at that line of German text for 10 full minutes. Then she opened her notebook to the last page and wrote down a number, 870,000. The surgery cost 870,000 yuan. Combined with post-operative rehab and facial scar revision, the total would be over 1.4 million. If she really were just a fast food worker, she would never in a lifetime scrape together that kind of money. But Kira Sterling was something else. She had another identity. 3 years earlier, while still employed at Whitmore Jewelry, she had submitted a portfolio of designs to an international open call platform for jewelry designers, under the anonymous handle K. The platform required no real name, only the work and a payment account. She had tossed in a few sketches on a whim. She never imagined those sketches would be selected by the brand, developed into a limited collection, and sold out across the European and American markets. The brand had been searching for her ever since, sending over a dozen messages through the platform's internal mail. Their initial offer of $50,000 in licensing fees had risen to $200,000, plus royalties. She hadn't checked the account since everything fell apart. 2 months after she started at the fast food joint, she suddenly remembered it one night. She logged in with her cracked old phone. 37 unread messages. The most recent one read, "K, we suspect something may have happened to you. If you see this, contact us at any time. Our collaboration offer is permanently open." She stared at that message for a long time. Then she clicked on the brand's contact and typed her reply with her left hand, 1 character at a time. "I was in an accident. My right hand is temporarily non-functional. I can only draw with my left hand now. Delivery cycles may take 2 to 3 times longer than normal. If you can accept that, we can work together. If not, I understand." The reply came back instantly. "Left-handed is fine. Your designs aren't valuable because of your right hand. They're valuable because of your brain." Over the next 3 years, she designed 7 collections for that brand. Every collection won international awards. The brand pushed her work into the world's most prestigious jewelry exhibitions. At Sotheby's, her limited edition pieces sold for 7 figures. But she never made a single public appearance. No promotional photos. No award ceremonies. The brand CEO knew her only as Kay, a designer who, due to an accident, cannot use her right hand and works exclusively with her left. They knew nothing of her real identity, nothing of her past. They only knew that Kay's designs possessed a texture no other designer could replicate, a fierce, fractured beauty forged in the crucible of absolute suffering. The day she finally saved enough for the surgery, she took a screenshot of her bank balance. $1,437,600. $12,600 of that had been earned over 3 years of frying chicken at the fast food joint, wages plus perfect attendance bonuses. The rest had come from Kay's design fees. She sent the brand a message. I need to take 6 months off. For a surgery. They asked, what kind of surgery? She replied, to fix my right hand. The surgery was performed at Heidelberg University Hospital. The lead surgeon was one of Europe's foremost specialists in nerve reconstruction. The operation lasted 7 hours. The surgeon harvested a segment of healthy tendon from the inside of her forearm and grafted it onto the back of her hand, then reconnected the severed nerve endings with sutures finer than human hair. The operation was a success, but the post-operative rehabilitation was more agonizing than anyone had anticipated. She had to do 4 hours of finger function exercises every day, starting from the most basic movements, squeezing a foam ball, picking up a marble, flipping over a playing card. Every movement came with searing pain. Not the pain of a healing wound, but the pain of nerves regenerating, a fire that shot from her fingertips all the way up to her shoulder. During those rehab sessions, she never cried out. She just bit down on a towel, held her right wrist steady with her left hand, and bent her fingers one by one. The first week, she could bend them 10 degrees. The second week, 30. After a month, 90 degrees. At the 3-month mark, she picked up a drafting pen with her right hand and drew a straight line on a piece of paper. The line trembled a little, but it was straight. She looked at that line and cried. It was the first time she had truly wept since crawling out of the fire. Not from the pain, from the sheer, overwhelming release of it. 3 years and 3 months. Over 1,100 days. She had finally held a pen again. The facial scar revision was done in parallel with the hand surgery. The surgeon took 3 thin sheets of skin from the outside of her thigh and grafted them onto her right cheek in 3 separate procedures. When the final sutures were removed, she looked at herself in the mirror. The scar was still there, lighter than before. The color had faded from deep red to a soft pink, and the edges had smoothed. But it was still there. It would always be there. She looked at her reflection and made a decision. No more revision surgeries. This scar would stay. It was not a mark of shame. It was the proof that the people who had tried to destroy her had failed. During her recovery in Germany, she began laying the groundwork for her return, working through Ms. Patricia Warren, her mother's college friend and a senior partner at an international law firm specializing in cross-border commercial litigation and arbitration. Kira had tracked her down during her 2nd year at the fast food joint. After hearing the full story, Ms. Warren was silent for 30 seconds. Then she said, I'll take this case. No fee. It's not about winning a lawsuit, Kira told her over the phone. I want them to admit, in front of everyone, what they did. I want the truth, full, public, and undeniable. Then you need more than evidence, Ms. Warren said. You need a financial entity capable of standing against both Whitmore Jewelry and Everlasting Love Diamonds simultaneously. That entity came into being a year later. Its name was Radiance Capital, registered in the Cayman Islands, and its beneficial owner was Kira Sterling. The initial funding came from 3 sources. All of Kay's design income from the past 3 years, an investment from Holden Shaw's Shaw Group, and a grant from a fund under the International Jewelry Design Association that supported independent original designers. Holden Shaw formally entered the picture at this stage. He was the founder and CEO of the Shaw Group, one of the top 20 jewelry industry fortunes globally. The group's core businesses were gemstone authentication, high-end custom design, and rare gem trading. It owned 12 jewelry brands and had distribution networks in 47 countries. Holden Shaw himself was, to the core, a creature of data, a double-degree graduate from MIT in computer science and materials science. He had taken over the family business at 25 and spent a decade transforming a traditional gemological institute into an industry-wide data platform. The industry's consensus on him was a sharp-tongued, cold-blooded, never makes an unprofitable deal. The first time he met Kira was not in some glamorous setting. It was in an airport departure lounge. Kira had just returned from her first phase of surgery in Germany and was waiting for a connecting flight. Beside her sat a middle-aged woman with a crying baby. Kira reached out and adjusted the angle of the baby carrier. The baby paused, then started wailing again. Kira dug into her bag and pulled out a small silver wind chime, no bigger than a keychain, and dangled it in front of the infant. The baby reached for it and stopped crying. Holden Shaw was sitting diagonally across from her and saw the entire scene. He noticed three things. First, the woman was using her left hand. Second, there was a long scar on the back of her right hand. Third, the little silver wind chime she'd used to soothe the baby was exquisitely crafted, a ring of peony blossoms engraved around its body. The engraving was not machine-stamped. It was hand-chiseled. He stood, walked over, and sat down next to her. "That peony engraving on your wind chime," he said. "The depth is uneven. The left side is about 0.3 millimeters deeper than the right. But it's precisely that unevenness that gives the petals a dimensionality no uniform machine stamp could achieve. Did you make this yourself?" Kira looked at him. She didn't recognize him. She just thought this bespectacled man had a very peculiar way of speaking. Every sentence packed with precise data points, like a quality control engineer evaluating a component. "Yes," she said. "I made it." "With your left hand?" "Correct." "What happened to your right?" "It was burned." Holden Shaw was silent for 2 seconds. Then he pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to her. It was simple, black stock, silver lettering, reading Shaw Group, Holden Shaw. No title, no phone number, just an email address. "If you ever decide to start your own jewelry brand," he said, standing up and tucking his boarding pass into his jacket, "send me an email." He walked 2 steps, then turned back. "One more thing. Your technique for soothing that baby was wrong. A wind chime's swing amplitude should be kept between 3 and 5 centimeters. Beyond that range, an infant's visual tracking can't keep up, which can actually make them more agitated. But the design of the chime itself is excellent." He left. His stride was fast, and his back disappeared through the boarding gate. At the time, Kira thought this man was insane. Only later did she realize Holden Shaw wasn't insane. He had a compulsive, almost obsessive attention to detail. And that attention would become one of the most critical weapons in her war. Because over the next 3 months, Holden Shaw took every piece of conclusive evidence from the trade secret case 3 years ago and reanalyzed all of it from scratch. Then he laid the analysis reports in front of her and said, "The holes in this evidence are bigger than a colander. The reason you lost back then wasn't because you had no evidence. It was because you didn't have anyone who could find the holes." He projected the timestamp analysis onto the wall. On the screen were 3 emails that had been presented as irrefutable proof. Each email's send time was logged in Whitmore Jewelry's internal systems. But Holden had found a detail no one else had noticed. At the exact moment those emails were supposedly being sent from Kira's computer, that same computer was connected to the Whitmore Jewelry conference room projector. The projector's connection logs and the email send records were pulled up side by side. The timeline overlap revealed a glaring impossibility. The same machine could not simultaneously drive the conference room projector and switch to an email client to send an encrypted email with attachments. The projector driver and the encrypted email transmission called on mutually exclusive system resources. It was a hard logic constraint at the operating system level. Impossible to falsify. Then the spliced audio. Holden fed the recording into his analysis software, and the voiceprint waveform spread across the big screen. He used a laser pointer to mark several nodes. Here, here, and here. The waveform shows clear breaks and resplicing artifacts. More critically, the background noise in this recording is inconsistent across the splice points. The first 3 seconds capture the sound of an inverter air conditioner. The next 3 seconds capture a fixed-speed unit. That means this recording was made in at least 2 different rooms. Finally, the $500,000 payoff. Holden pulled up the full money trail records and displayed them as a capital flow map. The money had been transferred from a Whitmore Jewelry offshore company, routed through 3 shell companies, and deposited into Kira's account. The registered agent for all 3 shell companies was the same person, a certain Mr. Zhao, William Whitmore's personal attorney. A signature sample from Zhao was placed beside the capital flow map for comparison. The handwriting analysis report was just one line. The account opening signatures for all three accounts matched the known handwriting of Mr. Zhao with 99.7% consistency. I couldn't do all of this alone, Holden said, shutting off the projector and turning to face Kira. But I have a team. 37 people. All poached from the top forensic institutes and data companies in the world. They don't know who they're working for. They just know they're doing a technical review of a historical case. I only need to know one thing from you. Do you want to overturn this case or not? Yes, Kira said. Then we start from the beginning. Holden pushed his glasses up. From the first piece of false evidence. We go through them one by one. For 4 full months, they reanalyzed every piece of fabricated evidence William Whitmore had manufactured 3 years ago. Every analysis report was stamped and signed by the National Forensic Science Institute. Every report was formatted to the standards of the International Arbitration Committee. Every page was admissible as court evidence. At the same time, Ms. Warren filed a petition for case review with the International Jewelry Design Arbitration Committee. The supporting documents filled 3 large suitcases. The core argument was a single sentence. Case number 0623 from 3 years ago contains significant evidentiary defects, and we petitioned the committee to reopen proceedings. The committee held 3 closed-door sessions. In the end, the vote to reopen was unanimous. On the same day, Radiance Capital completed its acquisition of Aurora Mining. Aurora Mining held the exclusive extraction rights to 3 major diamond mines in South Africa and was the largest supplier of diamond rough to Whitmore Jewelry. Once the acquisition was finalized, Aurora Mining immediately sent Whitmore Jewelry a contract termination notice. The stated reason was 8 words long. The foundation for our cooperation no longer exists. Whitmore Jewelry's upstream raw material supply was severed in a single day. William Whitmore flew to South Africa in person to negotiate. He didn't even get a meeting with Aurora Mining CEO. The company sent a mid-level manager to receive him, politely, firmly, and handed him the termination notice. In his hotel room in Johannesburg, Whitmore made a long-distance call home. On the other end, Chelsea's panicked voice spilled out. Dad, it's not just Aurora. 3 of our precious metal suppliers cut us off at the same time. And the factories, all 17 of our contract manufacturers, have stopped work. They all said they got word from upstream. I know, William Whitmore said. He hung up the phone and sat in that hotel room for the entire night. A vague, creeping realization was beginning to form. Someone was using the exact same methods against the Whitmores that they had used against Kira Sterling 3 years ago. Every move was precise. Every blow was fatal. Every step left him with no room to fight back. But he didn't know who it was. He had investigated Radiance Capital's background. On the surface, it was a Cayman-registered investment company with a complex shareholder structure that ultimately pointed to a few offshore trusts and funds. No names he recognized. He had also looked into the acquirer of Aurora Mining, another labyrinth of nested holding companies, vanishing into a jurisdiction that didn't require disclosure of beneficial owners. What he didn't know was that the architect of all these structures was a man named Holden Shaw. And Holden Shaw, in the Shaw Group's data center, was running a dedicated server that tracked Whitmore Jewelry's stock price, order flow, public sentiment index, and supply chain status in real time. Every fluctuation was recorded, analyzed, archived, and converted into the basis for the next move. He called the process closed-loop strike. Every reaction from Whitmore Jewelry fell within the predictive range of the data models, and every struggle triggered the next pre-programmed countermeasure. Chelsea Whitmore was the last person to understand the truth. She was accustomed to living in an information cocoon, a princess fawned over by everyone around her. The team beneath her fed her nothing but filtered good news every day: endorsement renewals, new store openings, social media follower growth. It wasn't until the disaster at the Everlasting Love Diamonds launch event that she truly realized everything had spiraled beyond her control. The pre-launch event for the new collection was held at the Four Seasons Hotel. Over 100 media outlets and industry guests were in attendance. Lucas Cross took the stage in a deep navy suit, radiating confidence, and unveiled the new season's designs, a diamond collection themed Eternal Tears, The centerpiece, a teardrop-shaped diamond ring. Chelsea, as the brand ambassador and design consultant, glided on stage in a champagne gown, her arm threaded through Lucas's, and smiled her gentle, practiced smile at the media. This Eternal Tears collection is something Lucas and I created together over the course of a year, inspired by our love. The cameras erupted in a frenzy. No one noticed the woman in the baseball cap standing at the very back of the room, dressed in a hotel housekeeper's uniform, a mop resting against the wall beside her, her cap pulled low. The giant screen flickered. Lucas was mid-sentence. This is the most important milestone in our brand's history, when the product visuals vanished. In their place appeared a high-resolution scan of a design sketch. Yellowed paper. A scorch mark in the lower right corner. Next to the teardrop ring on the sketch, 2 words were penciled in, The Fall. The signature read, Kira Sterling. The date, November 17th, 3 years ago. A full second of dead silence. Then the press section exploded. Everyone in the room recognized the name Kira Sterling, the central figure of the scandal that had rocked the jewelry world 3 years ago. Chelsea's face cycled through 3 shades in 5 seconds. Shock, fury, and then a bloodless, bone-white horror. She whipped her head toward the backstage technicians and screamed, "Turn it off. Shut it down." The technicians scrambled to yank cables, but the screen had already flipped to a new image, a design copyright registration certificate issued by the U.S. Copyright Office. The registered work was titled The Fall. The copyright holder, Kira Sterling. The registration date was a full 2.5 years before Everlasting Love Diamonds had filed for its design patent. The noise in the room swelled. The industry heavyweights in the front rows were exchanging looks and urgent murmurs. The shutter clicks from the press pit fell like a hailstorm. Chelsea dug her nails into her own palm, and tears instantly welled in her eyes. Her voice quivered into the microphone. "This is a misunderstanding. That sketch was created independently by our design team. It has nothing to do with Kira Sterling." She never finished. The screen shifted again. An audio file began to play. A young woman's voice spilled from the speakers, laced with a light, laughing contempt. "Just take all those unpublished sketches of Kira's. She's locked up in detention anyway. What's she going to do? Keep them? Dad, how's the legal team coming along? Once we win this case, she'll never be able to crawl back up." Every person in that room recognized the voice. It was Chelsea Whitmore. Lucas Cross turned and stared at her. For the first time, there was suspicion in his eyes. Chelsea's face went utterly white. Her hands began to shake. The microphone slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a piercing shriek of feedback. In the front row, an elderly man with silver hair and gold-rimmed glasses rose from his seat. Professor Alastair Montgomery, 71 years old, chairman of the Asia-Pacific chapter of the International Jewelry Design Association. 50 years in the industry. Everyone called him Professor Montgomery. He rarely attended commercial events. He had come today only because Everlasting Love Diamonds' PR team had invited him 3 times. And now he had a front-row seat to this. He removed his glasses, wiped them slowly, and spoke in a voice that was calm but carried. "I have seen the original of this copyright certificate. 3 years ago, when Kira Sterling submitted her application, I was one of her sponsors. This sketch is, without question, her original work." Chelsea's legs gave out. She stumbled backward. Every camera in the room swung toward her. Someone in the audience had already started a live stream. The viewer count rocketed from a few thousand to 500,000. And the woman who had set all of this in motion had already, silently, put down her mop and slipped out the back door of the Four Seasons. As Kira Sterling emerged into the back alley, a new message lit up her phone screen. "Holden Shaw. 1 word. Done." That afternoon, Lucas Cross's assistant transferred $200,000 to Kira's old bank account. What Lucas didn't know was that the old account was already under Holden Shaw's surveillance. The transfer record was captured, archived, and added to the evidence chain within 3 minutes. Ms. Warren reviewed it and said, "This amount isn't large, but it can serve as corroboration that the defendant, aware of the case's evidentiary defects, still attempted to influence the involved party through financial means." Back at the fast food joint in the slum, Kira hung her apron on the hook by the wall. Her phone buzzed. A message from Annie March. "Business is crazy today. I can't handle it alone. Get back here." She smiled, pulled her baseball cap back on, and headed toward the subway. Meanwhile, Chelsea Whitmore was in the VIP lounge backstage at the Four Seasons, sobbing hysterically. Lucas Cross stood across from her, leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets, watching her with an expression she had never seen before. "That audio," he said, his voice low. "Was that you?" Chelsea's head snapped up, her eyes red as raw wounds. "You're doubting me? Someone hacked my phone. This is a setup." "Who's setting you up?" Lucas cut her off. "Who do you think did this? That woman in the slum? The one frying chicken, with a ruined right hand and a scarred face, who can't even afford a full meal. You think she hacked the Four Seasons security system, the U.S. Copyright Office database, and your personal phone?" Chelsea's mouth opened. No words came. A cold tendril of realization was beginning to curl through her. She didn't know where Kira Sterling was right now, or what she was doing. Every month, she sent someone to check on that fast food joint, and the reports always came back more or less the same. But a woman who had accepted her fate, would she have been at today's launch event? She shivered. But her thinking stopped there, because her cognitive framework simply couldn't accommodate the far more terrifying possibility that the woman she thought she had ground into the dirt had never accepted her fate at all. She had simply crouched in the mud, spending 3 years sharpening a blade. Chelsea's phone rang. The caller ID, William Whitmore. She answered. Her father said just one sentence. "Come home. Now. Don't speak to anyone." Chelsea shoved past Lucas and fled the lounge. What she didn't know was that William Whitmore had ordered her home immediately because the Whitmore legal team had just received a copy of the evidence submitted to the arbitration committee. Attached to that copy was a voice memo Chelsea had sent to her father 3.5 years ago. In the message, she had laughed and said something with all the casual lightness of discussing weekend shopping plans. "Dad, why don't we just burn her studio down? She's already in detention anyway. One little fire. No one's ever going to trace it back to us." The voice memo had been captured because Chelsea had forgotten to stop the recording after finishing the spliced audio session in the studio. That one careless mistake was the loose thread that would unravel everything. 15 days before the International Jewelry Expo, Professor Montgomery's studio occupied the second floor of an old mansion by the Suzhou River, crammed with authentication instruments and yellowing design sketches. When Kira Sterling walked in and removed her baseball cap, Montgomery was bent over a jade brooch, examining it through a jeweler's loupe. "You're here," he said without looking up. "Sit." Kira sat and placed a stack of design drafts on the table. Montgomery set down the brooch, removed his loupe, and began leafing through the pages. On the third page, his hand stopped. "You drew these with your left hand?" He lifted his head, his gaze pausing briefly on the scar on her cheek. "There's a clumsiness here that wasn't in your right-handed work. But that's actually an improvement. Your right hand was too perfect. Flawlessness can be its own kind of flaw. The left-handed lines, there's struggle in them." He set the drafts down, took off his glasses, and rubbed his eyes. Then he put the glasses back on and pulled a brown envelope from his drawer, laying it on the table. "This is the arbitration committee's internal review opinion. I'm not supposed to show you this, but I'm showing you anyway. All 7 arbitrators unanimously agree your evidence chain is complete, sufficient, and irrefutable. But there's one more thing you need to do." "What's that?" Kira asked. "Make a public appearance." Montgomery looked into her eyes. "Not as K. As Kira Sterling. You need every person who ever saw you on your knees to see you standing on your feet." Kira was silent for a moment. Then she stood and shouldered her canvas bag. "Professor, I should get back. The dinner rush at the fast food place is from 6 to 8. We're short-handed on the fryer." She was at the door when Montgomery called after her. "Kra, what was that code name of yours again?" "K. Ethereal's chief designer. The one who never shows her face in public? That Rebirth collection that won the Global Jewelry Design Award last year. That was you, wasn't it?" I told someone at the time. No one in the world could have produced that body of work except Kira Sterling. Kira turned back and gave him a smile. There was no bitterness in it, no triumph. Just a quiet, unassuming clarity. "Professor, the opening ceremony of the expo next week. You'll be there, won't you?" "I will." Montgomery rose to his feet. "Not only will I be there, I'll bring every person in this association who has a voice." By the time Kira stepped out of the old mansion, dusk was falling. At the subway entrance, her phone buzzed. Holden Shaw had sent a screenshot. An internal email William Whitmore had just blasted to the entire management team of Whitmore Jewelry. The email was one sentence. The company is currently experiencing temporary difficulties. Please remain calm. I will resolve all issues personally at the Jewelry Expo. He's planning a counterattack? Kira typed back. Holden's reply was nearly instantaneous. He can't. The only card he had left to play was the Industry Association. But I just received word. The International Jewelry Design Association's Executive Committee passed a resolution this afternoon. William Whitmore's vice chairman position has been suspended, effective immediately, and a formal ethics investigation has been opened. You did that. I don't have that kind of power. I simply sent every committee member an email with a copy of William Whitmore's 3-year-old note to his legal director. Bury this. Whatever it costs. After the committee read that sentence, their discussion lasted 14 minutes before the vote passed. 14 minutes. 6 minutes faster than my most optimistic projection. Kira put her phone away without replying. She knew Holden Shaw didn't need her thanks. He needed her to finish what she'd started. He was a man who spoke the language of data, and his data was telling him that Kira Sterling's plan was proceeding exactly on schedule, without a single deviation. For him, that was the best possible reward. 7 days before the expo, Whitmore Jewelry's stock price had plunged to an all-time low. The upstream supply chain was completely severed. All contract manufacturers had halted work. Half of the company's 300 stores nationwide had been forced to close due to inventory shortages. William Whitmore liquidated 2 properties and 3 luxury cars, desperate to secure emergency loans from the banks. No bank would touch him, because Radiance Capital had issued a risk advisory to all partner banks, explicitly flagging Whitmore Jewelry as carrying significant legal risk that may trigger cascading defaults. Chelsea Whitmore locked herself in the walk-in closet of her villa and didn't come out for 3 days. She was too afraid to look at her phone. Her social media accounts had been overrun. Every comment asked the same question. When you stole Kira Sterling's designs, did you feel even a shred of guilt? Her management agency drafted 3 versions of a PR response. Each was obliterated by a fresh wave of revelations. The latest was a clip of surveillance footage. Chelsea driving to the slum fast food joint to visit Kira, walking in with red-rimmed eyes and an expression of tender concern, then walking out and making a phone call. The camera caught the words she spoke. That ugly freak is still alive. Tough little cockroach. The footage came from the newly installed security cameras at Annie Marge's restaurant. Kira had suggested the installation, saying, "There've been a lot of thieves around lately, better to be safe." Annie Marge had agreed. The first thief the cameras had caught was Chelsea Whitmore. Lucas Cross fared worse. The owner of Everlasting Love Diamonds contract manufacturer, a man named Chun, suddenly turned on him, leaking an internal email to the media. The email proved that Lucas had seen the original sketch of the teardrop ring 2 years earlier, knew it came from Kira's unpublished portfolio, yet had still instructed his team to tweak the details and use it. An hour after the email went public, Lucas Cross posted a statement on his personal social media. He was leaving the industry. Then he did something no one expected. He drove alone to the slum. It was raining. Kira was mopping the floor when she heard a knock on the glass door. She looked up through the fogged window and saw Lucas Cross's face. He wore a black hoodie, no umbrella, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked like a man whose entire skeleton had been pulled out of him, a hollow, unrecognizable shell of the diamond prince he'd once been. Kira set the mop aside and opened the door. "What do you want?" Lucas stood in the rain, his lips moving several times before he managed. "Nien Nien. My name is Kira Sterling." She cut him off. Lucas looked as if she'd struck him. He stared at her face, at the scar, at her utterly tranquil eyes. His Adam's apple bobbed. Then, abruptly, he dropped to his knees on the wet concrete. "I'm sorry. Kira, I know this is too late. I should have believed you. Those pieces of evidence had so many holes in them. All I had to do was look at them once, carefully, and I would have seen. But I didn't look. I didn't want to. The Whitmores had proposed that merger enlisting plan, and I needed their resources." Kira leaned against the doorframe and looked down at him. Her face held no anger, no grief, not even a ripple of emotion. She looked at him the way you look at a stranger who has nothing to do with your life. "Are you done kneeling?" she asked. If you're done, you can go. The ground is cold. Lucas's head snapped up. His eyes were shot through with red. Give me another chance. I can make it up to you. I'll give you half my shares in everlasting love. I'll marry you. We can redo the wedding, the one we never had. I don't care about the scar on your face. Kira smiled. She pulled her phone from her apron pocket, opened a photo, and held it up in front of him. It was an invitation letter in English, the header reading Vienna International Jewelry Design Masters Forum. The name printed in the invitee field was 2 letters, K. Mr. Cross, I already have a date. She put her phone away, and her gaze drifted past his shoulder into the depths of the rainy night. And my tastes have changed. I used to like diamonds. Now I prefer gold. She turned and walked back into the restaurant, locking the door from the inside. Lucas knelt in the rain, the puddle beneath him growing deeper. He watched the blurred, slender silhouette move behind the glass door, and suddenly felt as though something had seized his heart and was squeezing it with brutal force. It wasn't heartbreak. It was far worse than heartbreak. It was the awakening of a man who had never valued anything in his life to the sudden, crushing realization that he had thrown away something more precious than the entire world combined. But that glass door would not open for him again. 3 days before the expo, Gloria Harper found the fast food joint in the early evening. She was dressed in a fuchsia skirt suit, her makeup thick as a mask, and she pushed through the door with the familiar, overbearing confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime looking down on others. Kira, sweetheart, Mother's here to see you. Her voice was pitched in a theatrical wail, the syllables stretched long. Look how thin you've gotten. Kira was wiping down the stove. She paused for just a beat at the sound of that voice. Gloria walked in, her eyes catching on the scar on Kira's cheek for exactly 1 second before skittering away. The performance was immaculate. 3 parts heartache, 3 parts self-reproach, 4 parts maternal tenderness, perfectly calibrated. Kira, Mother knows she was wrong. I should never have made you sign that declaration severing our family relationship. I was forced into it. She pulled a bank card from her purse and set it on the table. There's $50,000 on this card. Everything Mother's saved over the years. Take it. Get the scar on your face fixed. Live a good life. Kira placed her rag in the sink and turned around slowly. Did Chelsea Whitmore send you? Gloria's expression froze for a fraction of a second. And no, I came on my own. Kira pulled out her phone and tapped an audio file. Gloria's voice exploded from the speaker. Chelsea, sweetheart, don't worry. Once I turn on the waterworks, that girl always softens up. That ugly freak has been starved for love since she was a child. I'll toss her a little bone, and she'll drop this whole arbitration thing. The audio had been recorded half an hour ago. Chelsea, in her desperation, had forgotten that Gloria's phone was also within Holden Shaw's surveillance net. Every word of the call had been captured, clear and damning. Gloria's face went paper white. Kira pocketed her phone. Her tone was as casual as if she were discussing the weather. Stepmother, when you made me sign that severance declaration in the hospital, my father wasn't even a patient there. He didn't find out I'd been arrested until the next day. That night, the shock gave him a cerebral hemorrhage. He went straight into the ICU. Gloria stumbled backward. I've been looking for my father, Kira said. For 3 years. You moved him through 3 different nursing homes. Every time I got close, you transferred him out. You thought that would stop me. She pulled several printed pages from her canvas bag and laid them on the table. Admission records and payment receipts from the nursing homes. They showed that Gloria had used money from Chelsea Whitmore to move Kira's father to an unlicensed facility, a black site care home charging $800 a month, staffed by day laborers from the construction site next door. I've already had my father moved. He's now in the best rehabilitation hospital in Shanghai, with a professional medical team providing round-the-clock care. Kira took the pages back, and her eyes finally settled on Gloria's face. As for you, stepmother, you're facing charges of abandonment and property misappropriation. The evidence has been forwarded to law enforcement. I suggest you get a good night's sleep tonight. Gloria collapsed into a chair, her fuchsia suit crumpling around her like a plastic flower someone had crushed in their fist. Her lips trembled, trying to form words. Kira had already turned and walked into the back kitchen. Auntie Marge poked her head out from the service window, glanced at Gloria, and ducked back in. 2 minutes later, she emerged with a glass of water and set it in front of Gloria. Ma'am, she said, finish your water and be on your way. You're not welcome here. Gloria didn't drink the water. She grabbed her purse and fled. Her heel caught on the doorframe, and she nearly fell. She steadied herself and looked back at Kira, who was standing at the sink with her back turned, washing a rag with the same unhurried rhythm as always, as if the last few minutes had been nothing more than an inconsequential blip in the day's workflow. The day of the International Jewelry Expo, Shanghai International Convention Center, 10 o'clock in the morning. The opening ceremony was held in the largest exhibition hall. The president of the National Jewelry Industry Association, the vice chairman of the International Jewelry Design Association, and CEOs from all the major brands were in attendance. Chelsea Whitmore, in her capacity as Ethereal's China ambassador and Best Jewelry Designer nominee, was seated in the center of the main stage. She wore a gown of pure red, her makeup flawless, her smile poised. The week's turmoil had hollowed out her cheeks, sharpening her jawline, but she still believed she could turn this around today. Her father sat in the first row. He had invited 3 association vice chairmen to flank him, to, as he put it, show everyone the Whitmore family's confidence. The atmosphere was electric. The host ran through the opening remarks while the warm-up video looped on the giant screen. Then the screen flickered. Not the flicker of a malfunction. It was a smooth, seamless transition, clearly orchestrated by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The promotional video cut to a live feed, a small studio space, where a young woman sat at a workbench with her back to the camera. The table in front of her was covered with jewelry-making tools, drafting pens, calipers, a gemstone lamp, a computer connected to the big screen. The crowd began to murmur. The woman lifted her left hand and began to sketch on a drawing tablet. Her movements were fluid and unhurried, every line as precise as if it had been cut by a machine. Everyone in the room noticed 2 things at once. She was using her left hand, and on the back of her right hand, a vicious old scar stretched from the web of her thumb all the way to her wrist. Chelsea Whitmore's gaze locked onto that silhouette. Her fingers dug into the velvet armrest of her chair. The sketch was finished. As the final line tapered into place, the woman set down her drafting pen and picked up a pair of tweezers finer than a human hair. The workbench now held a small pile of metal wire and tiny gemstone fragments. The camera pushed in for a close-up. Gold wire, 0.1 millimeters in diameter, nearly invisible to the naked eye. Filigree, the most difficult technique in international jewelry competitions. In all of China, the number of artisans capable of independently completing a filigree piece could be counted on one hand. All of them were over 65. The woman on the screen worked with her left hand. Her steadiness was unnerving. She used the tweezers to grasp the gold wire, winding, folding, pinching into floral shapes, filling in the framework with delicate coils. Every movement flowed into the next with flawless precision. 10 minutes later, the petal of a gold peony bloomed beneath her fingertips. The petal was thin as a cicada's wing. The light passed through the woven gold, illuminating the intricate, densely layered structure. Every strand had found its one true, correct place. The room had gone completely silent. The journalists' cameras were fixed on the screen. Every breath in the hall had unconsciously slowed. 20 minutes later, the peony was complete. 72 petals, 144 stamens, the tips set with tiny splinters of ruby, like morning dew caught on golden flowers. The woman placed the finished piece on a rotating display stand, and the camera cut to a 360-degree close-up. Then she stood and turned around. The scar, running from the corner of her right eye to her ear, fully exposed under the lights. She wore a simple blouse, no jewelry except for a plain silver band on the ring finger of her left hand, her mother's ring. The collective gasp from the audience merged into a single rushing wind. Chelsea Whitmore shot to her feet. The blood drained from her face like water from a broken vessel. Her lips quivered as she forced out 2 syllables. Kir. Kira Sterling didn't look at her. She picked up the microphone on the workbench. Her voice was steady. I am Kira Sterling. 3 years ago, I was sued by Whitmore Jewelry for trade secret infringement and blacklisted across the entire industry. I am also Chief Designer of the international jewelry brand Ethereal. Every piece of work credited to K over the past 3 years is my original creation. She paused for a single beat. Today, I am attending this jewelry expo in my capacity as the applicant in case number 0623 before the International Jewelry Design Arbitration Committee. I am here to publicly disclose the full body of evidence in this case. These materials have been simultaneously submitted to the judicial authorities and the industry association. Behind her, the giant screen began scrolling through the evidence. Document 1. The timestamp analysis of the forged emails. Document 2. The VoicePrint authentication report on the spliced audio. Document 3. The traceback of the $500,000 payoff. Document 4. The voice memo recovered from Chelsea Whitmore's phone, timestamped 1 week before the case was filed 3 years ago. In the recording, Chelsea said to William Whitmore, "Dad, what if we get caught?" And William Whitmore replied, "We won't get caught. People like Kira Sterling have no background. You can crush them like ants and no one will ever speak for them." One piece after another. One truth after another. The audience shifted from shock to silence, and from silence to a slow, simmering rage. The association vice chairman in the front row rose to their feet and turned to look at William Whitmore. His face had gone the gray of a corpse. His lips moved soundlessly. The evidence finished. Kira switched off the screen. She picked up the gold peony from the workbench, walked to the front of the stage, and swept her gaze across the hall. 3 years ago, when I was convicted, not a single courtroom was willing to accept my evidence. I was a discredited debtor. My voice was silenced. My rights were stripped away. But today, the arbitration committee's hearing has delivered its conclusion. I am innocent. She raised the gold peony in her left hand. This flower is called rebirth. I made it with my left hand, because my right hand was indeed injured. 3 extensor tendons were severed by broken glass. But the craft of filigree has never cared which hand you use. All it cares about is whether you're willing to draw gold wire 300 times in a day, break it 299 times, and then, on the 300th time, keep going. She set the gold peony on the flower stand at the front edge of the stage, then turned and walked off. Behind her, the shutter clicks fell like a hurricane. William Whitmore was being helped out of his seat by association officials, his legs buckling, his gold-rimmed glasses askew on his nose. Chelsea Whitmore collapsed into her chair, her red gown pooling on the floor like a smear of melted lipstick. Out of the crowd stepped a man in a charcoal gray suit, Holden Shaw. He pulled a velvet ring box from the inner pocket of his jacket, walked up to Kira, and opened it. Inside was a simple band, no diamond, just a ring of gold filigree woven into a peony motif. His voice was quiet, but the journalists nearby could hear him clearly. "Miss Sterling, every jewelry brand under the Shaw Group is now open for collaboration with you. Also, the filigree work on this ring is based on page 42 of your sketchbook, the one that was burned 3 years ago. I bought the scorched draft at an auction. Then I had someone restore it." Kira looked down at the ring. 3 years ago, late one night, she had finished that sketch while Lucas Cross sat beside her and asked, "What are you drawing?" She had said, "It's a ring. Someday I'm going to wear it when I marry someone who believes in me." She had never imagined that such a person truly existed. Holden Shaw held the ring box out to her. The tips of his ears were faintly, barely perceptibly pink, but his expression was still that same unruffled, sharp-tongued, data-obsessed engineer's face. "No pressure. This isn't a proposal. It's just returning something to its rightful owner." Kira took the ring and slid it onto the ring finger of her left hand. The simple band settled exactly over the deepest scar on her hand. Every camera in the hall was aimed at them. That afternoon, Kira Sterling innocent, identity of K revealed, Whitmore father and daughter detained, and gold peony filigree simultaneously occupied the top 4 trending spots, with total topic views surpassing 6 billion. William Whitmore and Chelsea Whitmore were formally placed under criminal investigation on charges of malicious prosecution and trade secret infringement. Gloria Harper was arrested on charges of abandonment and perjury. Lucas Cross's Everlasting Love Diamonds entered bankruptcy liquidation, and all its stores were permanently closed. 3 months later, the Golden Hall of the Vienna Musikverein. Kira Sterling stood in the wings and peered through the gap in the curtains. The hall below was a dense mosaic of faces, jewelry designers from over 40 countries, brand founders, industry association delegates, journalists. The first row held Professor Montgomery, Annie March, Fiona Wong, Ms. Warren, and her father. Mr. Sterling sat in a wheelchair, holding a promotional flyer for the Jewelry Expo, the one with Kira's lecture poster printed on it. He turned the flyer over and, with a trembling hand, wrote a line on the back. The caregiver read it aloud. "Daughter, Dad is here." Kira crouched in front of the wheelchair and held his hand. His hand was so thin, the knuckles prominent, and 4 catheters still taped to the back. But his grip was strong. "Dad, you sit right here and watch me go up there," she said. Mr. Sterling couldn't speak, but he nodded with effort. There was light in his eyes. Holden Shaw stood behind her, a tablet in his hand. The 7th time he had checked the real-time sentiment data that day. "Nervous?" he asked. "A little. Then just imagine everyone out there is a fried chicken customer. You used to face customers every day. These ones just didn't order chicken. They ordered your brain." He flipped the tablet around to show her. "I pulled your old fast food data. Your highest single-day customer count was 343. There are 1,200 people out there today. That's a little over triple, but the principle is the same." Kira looked at the number on the screen, 343, and smiled. "When did you pull the fast food data?" "Last year." Holden's expression was utterly unruffled. "I built a personal database on you last year. Over 3 years, you fried 113,722 pieces of chicken. You drew 809 pages of designs with your left hand. You lived in that slum for 1,042 days. You were visited by Chelsea Whitmore 37 times. Everything is dated, time-stamped, and sourced. Holden Shaw, you turned all my scars into data. Data doesn't lie." He closed the tablet and met her eyes. "People lie. They betray you. They stand beside you and then turn around and throw a glass of wine in your face. But data doesn't. You survived in those numbers for 1,042 days. You didn't give up for a single one of them. Those aren't scars. They're your battle record." The lights in the Golden Hall dimmed. A spotlight found the center of the stage. The host spoke her name. Holden adjusted her microphone wire for her, his fingers brushing her waist with the delicacy of someone handling a museum piece. She walked into the light. The stage screens magnified her face in high definition. The scar on her right cheek was captured in crystalline detail. No makeup, no jewelry, except the gold filigree peony band on her left ring finger. She lifted the microphone with her left hand. "Hello, I am Kira Sterling. I am also Kay. I am also, as you may have seen online, the disfigured woman who spent 3 years frying chicken in a fast food joint." Gentle laughter and applause rippled through the hall. In the front row, Auntie Marge raised both hands over her head and clapped furiously, shouting, "That's my girl." The theme of my talk today is flaws. The screen behind her lit up with a microscopic image of a diamond. Magnified 300 times, the stone's interior was laced with fine cracks and inclusions, every one of them starkly visible. In the jewelry industry, flaws are inclusions in a gemstone, the key factor that determines a stone's value. Flawless diamonds exist only in laboratory advertisements. Every natural stone carries its own unique fractures and inclusions. The screen shifted from the diamond to the gold peony. Magnified 300 times, every microscopic texture on each gold filament was visible. The textures weren't the uniform smoothness of a machine finish. They were the slightly undulating traces left by a human hand pulling wire. Each ripple a record of the artisan's mistakes, corrections, more mistakes, more corrections. Hundreds of failures, and finally, the single true line that remained. Flaws are not defects to be hidden. They are the stories time writes on our bodies. My face. My right hand. The 17 notebooks filled with crooked left-handed sketches. These are the evidence that I crawled out of the fire. They are not scars I need to feel ashamed of. She extended her hand, left palm facing upward. The stage light illuminated a pale scar running across her palm. This scar is from when I crawled out of my burning studio. My hand pressed down on a door handle that had been heated red hot. 3 years. It hasn't faded. I don't need it to. She lowered her hand and swept her gaze across the hall. There are many young designers here today. You may be going through rejection, theft, suppression, betrayal. You may feel as if you've been marked with flaws that can never be erased. What I want to tell you is this: you don't need to erase them. Your flaws are your unique inclusions, the single standard that distinguishes a natural diamond from manufactured glass. Manufactured glass can be perfectly flawless, but it's worthless. You are valuable precisely because of the fractures you carry. The applause began in one corner and spread swiftly through the entire Golden Hall. In the front row, Professor Montgomery removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. One last thing. This is for everyone who has ever been ground into the dirt. She paused. The mud is not your destination. It is your foundation. The flowers that grow from the mud have the deepest roots, and they bloom the longest. The applause rose like a tide and swallowed the hall. A full standing ovation. 1,200 people clapping as one, the sound reverberating beneath the gilded ceiling for a long, long time. Kira bowed to the audience and walked toward the wings. Holden Shaw stood beside the curtain. His tablet was locked. You weren't watching the data? I wasn't watching it just now. He slid the tablet into his jacket. When you delivered that last line, the positive sentiment ratio was something I didn't need to check. Kira tilted her head at him. Because I was listening to you. I heard every word you said. The data can be reviewed later. You can't. They looked at each other for several seconds. From the corridor outside the Golden Hall came a sudden swell of noise. The door burst open. Auntie Marge was the first through, followed by Fiona, and then Professor Montgomery pushing Mr. Sterling's wheelchair. Kira, Auntie Marge's eyes were red. She was wearing a new floral blouse. You were incredible. I was crying so hard my false eyelashes fell off. Wait, I'm not wearing false eyelashes today. You never wear false eyelashes, Kira said. Then my real eyelashes cried off. Fiona stood nearby, her guitar in her hands. She strummed a chord, a bright, clean C major. Mr. Sterling stirred in his wheelchair. With trembling hands, he held out the expo flyer. On the back, in crooked, shaky handwriting, a line of text had been written, slightly smudged with sweat. Daughter, you've surpassed even your mother. Kira crouched down and wrapped both hands around her father's. Dad, once things settle down, I'm taking you home. Mr. Sterling nodded. A single tear escaped his sunken eye and landed on the flyer, blooming into a tiny blue flower in the ink. Holden Shaw stood a few steps away. He removed his glasses, wiped them, and put them back on. He pulled out his tablet and typed a note into a data dashboard. Kira Sterling personal positive sentiment ratio at all-time high, simultaneously detecting anomalous system temperature. Cause, inadequate air conditioning in Golden Hall, or operator emotional fluctuation. He stared at the words, operator emotional fluctuation, for 3 seconds, then deleted them. Outside the Golden Hall, the Vienna sunset had set half the sky on fire. A flight from Shanghai had just touched down. Its cabin door opened, and over a dozen representatives from Chinese jewelry brands disembarked, phones in hand, every screen showing the same trending topic. Hashtag Kira Sterling Golden Hall. They were too late for the speech, but they had arrived in time for something even more important. That night, the International Jewelry Design Association announced the establishment of the Kira Sterling Foundation, dedicated to funding jewelry design students from low-income families. The first cohort, 1,000 students. The application requirement was a single line, submit one hand-drawn design. Subject and materials, unlimited. 6 months later, Shanghai, Kira Sterling's new brand, Rebirth, opened its first flagship store on West Nanjing Road. She had designed the store herself. The entire facade was clad in panels of fire-darkened copper, the surface textured to mimic the woven strands of a filigree piece. The logo above the door wasn't a glowing light box. It was a single gold peony, handmade in filigree, sealed within a block of crystal, scattering tiny shards of light in the sun. On opening day, the line stretched for 2 blocks. Among the waiting crowd were jewelry industry titans, designers who had traveled from every corner of the country, school kids in uniforms from Zhongshan Road Middle School, and a group of old neighbors from the slum. The fruit vendor who had always parked his cart across from the fast food joint was there too. A crate of oranges balanced on his tricycle. A handwritten sign was propped among the fruit. Congratulations, little Kira. Auntie Marge stood behind the cash register in a new blouse and a black server's apron. Her own restaurant, now on the first floor of a shopping mall, had been open for 2 months. She had closed it for the day just to be here. She packed purchases for customers while boasting to anyone within earshot. This girl used to fry chicken in my place. 300 pieces a day. Her hands were steadier than any machine. Kira descended the staircase from the 2nd floor. She wore a navy dress. The scar on her face was uncovered. The gold filigree band on her left ring finger caught the light as she moved. She saw Annie March. She saw Fiona. She saw Professor Montgomery explaining her design philosophy to the president of the Jewelry Association. She saw Holden Shaw leaning against a wall, staring at a data report. The report was upside down. She walked over and rotated the report 180 degrees. "Mr. Shaw, your data is upside down." Holden Shaw, without a flicker of expression, took the report back as if nothing had happened. "I did that on purpose. Reverse reading enhances cognitive flexibility." Kira did not call him out. "What are you looking at?" First-hour foot traffic for the news store. 837 visitors. 43% conversion. Median transaction value, $12,000. He paused. "Your first-hour performance has surpassed the opening day numbers for the 3 biggest international brands on the bund." Kira looked at the crowd flowing through the store, then back at Holden. He was standing in his corner, the tips of his ears slightly red, the store lights reflecting off his glasses. She realized, suddenly, that this man had been paying attention to her in a very strange way ever since that day in the airport lounge when he'd informed her that the wind chime's swing amplitude should be kept between 3 and 5 centimeters. He had turned every one of her scars into data. He had logged every single day. He had quantified every counterstrike as a performance metric. He expressed care through analysis. He masked nervousness with reports. He substituted declarations of love with data sets. "Holden," she said. "Yes." "Put the report down." Holden glanced at her, then set the report on the nearby counter. Kira took a step forward, raised her left hand, and took hold of his right. His hand was warmer than hers. His knuckles were slightly stiff, probably from the tension of holding an upside-down report. "Thank you," she said. Holden looked down at their clasped hands. The ring on her left finger was the gold filigree peony he had cast for her. He could feel the warmth of her fingertips against the back of his hand. "No need to thank me. I was simply following the data." "Shut up," Kira interrupted. Her tone was gentle but absolute. "Just this once. Don't talk to me about data." Holden shut his mouth. He was quiet for about 5 seconds. Then he gave her hand a small, gentle squeeze in return. The pressure was light, but precise, just enough to enfold her fingers in his palm. A small commotion stirred at the entrance. A girl in a school uniform squeezed through the crowd, breathless, and rushed up to Kira. It was the girl from Zhongshan Road Middle School. She was clutching something in her hand, a small ring woven from silver wire. The petals were crooked and uneven, but it was unmistakably a peony. "Sis." The girl thrust the ring toward Kira. "I made it. I told my mom I want to study jewelry design, and she said yes. I used my allowance to buy the silver wire. I wove it myself. It took me 3 months. I broke it at least 100 times." Kira took the ring and held it up to the light. The silver wire was pulled too thick. The petal proportions were off. The weave density was uneven. But she noticed one detail. This peony had 72 petals. Not one missing. "You counted the petals?" Kira asked. "You said it yourself. A peony has to have 72 petals." The girl's voice was dead serious. "I counted them one by one." Kira handed the silver ring back to the girl. Then she slipped the gold filigree peony band off her own finger and placed it in the girl's palm. "Feel this. The gold wire inside is 0.1 millimeters in diameter. Your silver wire right now is about 0.3 millimeters. But that's not what matters. What matters is, when you got to the 72nd petal, you didn't give up." The girl cradled the ring in her hands, her eyes reddening. Kira crouched down and looked into her eyes. "Starting today, you come to the shop every Saturday afternoon. I'll teach you filigree." The girl nodded hard, her ponytail bouncing. Behind her, someone in the crowd recognized Kira talking to the girl and snapped a photo. That night, the photo went viral with the hashtag Kira takes an apprentice. One comment, liked millions of times, read, "The woman who once scavenged chicken bones outside a fast food joint is now crouched in her flagship store, teaching filigree to a girl from a struggling family." This isn't a comeback. This is rebirth. 2 years later, Kira Sterling's brand Rebirth had opened 120 stores worldwide. Annual revenue had surpassed 4 billion. The International Jewelry Design Association inducted her into its Hall of Fame, the youngest inductee on the list, and the only one to have produced her entire body of work using her left hand. The Kira Sterling Foundation had funded over 3,000 jewelry design students from low-income families. 127 of them had been accepted into top international design schools. 38 had won awards in global competitions. The girl from Zhongshan Road Middle School was the 38th. Her winning piece was a gold filigree peony brooch, 72 petals, each one thin as a moth's wing. The judge's comment was a single sentence. This work carries the shadow of her teacher. But what it carries even more is her own voice. William Whitmore, convicted on charges of malicious prosecution, trade secret infringement, and arson, was sentenced to 17 years in prison with 5 years deprivation of political rights. Chelsea Whitmore received 12 years. Gloria Harper received 3 years, suspended for 2, for abandonment and perjury. Lucas Cross, after Everlasting Love Diamonds went bankrupt, left the jewelry industry entirely. Someone spotted him in a small town in Yunnan, running a modest guest house. His days were neither good nor bad. Kira Sterling never visited any of them in prison. Someone asked her why. She said, "I don't hate them anymore. Hatred is a heavy emotion. I don't need it now." Annie Marge's fast food joint had closed, not because business was bad, but because her new restaurant on the mall's first floor was doing so well she couldn't manage both. She hired 8 employees and became a hands-off boss. Her daily routine reduced to strolling around and occasionally frying a batch of chicken just to keep her hand in. She told everyone the same thing. The bowl of congee I gave little Kira was the most profitable investment of my life. Fiona Wong released 3 albums and won 2 music awards. With funding from the Kira Sterling Foundation, she founded a mutual aid organization for street musicians, helping over 400 people who sang beneath overpasses and in underground walkways. Her signature song was still Underpass, but she'd changed the final line. The original ended, "I stand in the wind and sing until dawn." The new version ended, "I stand on the stage and sing until dawn." When she changed it, she called Kira. "Your own song. Why are you asking me?" Kira said. "Because you're the one who helped me stand up," Fiona said. Kira replied, "I didn't help you stand up. You sang yourself there." After Professor Montgomery retired and handed the Asia-Pacific chairmanship to his successor, he wrote an article for the association's internal journal titled "The Best Designer I Ever Met." He never mentioned Kira Sterling by name, but everyone knew. The final paragraph was a single sentence. "She taught me one thing. The most precious thing in the jewelry industry is not diamonds. It is a person who can crawl out of hell and, with her left hand, draw a gold peony." On the 3rd anniversary of Rebirth, Holden Shaw did something no one expected. He took the database he had built on Kira over all those years and turned it into a book. He printed exactly 1 copy. The cover was unadorned, plain. The title was a number, 1042, the number of days she had lived in that slum. He left the book on her office desk without saying a word. Kira opened it. It was filled with data: how many pieces of chicken she had fried, how many pages of designs she had drawn, how many times Chelsea had visited, the dates of every award she had won. The last page was not data. It was a single line, handwritten in Holden's script. "At the end of all these numbers is you. But you are not a number." Kira closed the book and looked up. Holden Shaw was standing in the doorway of her office, pretending to adjust the door handle. She stood, walked over to him, and reached up to remove his glasses. "Your prescription isn't that strong. You can manage without them," she said. Holden squinted at her. Without the lenses, his eyes were noticeably softer. "Without them, I can't see the details clearly." "Then look at me." Kira folded the glasses and slipped them into his jacket pocket. "The broad strokes are enough." Holden was still for 2 seconds. Then the corner of his mouth curved. Not the usual faint, ambiguous arc, but a real, irrepressible smile. "Your broad strokes," he said, "are the most beautiful curves I've ever seen." Is that a romantic line? It's a data description. Holden's expression was perfectly serious. The tips of his ears had gone crimson. "I could prove, in 37 different ways, that the contours of your face satisfy the golden ratio. But my favorite way is, every time I see them, I want to fix your microphone wire for you." Kira laughed. When she laughed, the scar on her right cheek was tugged gently upward, like a pale pink stream tracing its way across her skin. She didn't mind it at all anymore. She knew that the people who truly loved her didn't look at the scar. They looked at everything she was. She held out her hand. Holden took it. Outside the window, the Bund was bathed in sunset. A cruise ship drifted slowly down the Huangpu River. On her office wall hung a framed design sketch, the scorched draft of the gold peony, the charred edge still bearing the mark of the fire from 3 years ago. Beside it, in a glass case, hung the broken fluorescent bulb from Annie Marge's fast food joint. The bulb no longer lit up, but a label was affixed to it, and the label read, 1,042 days, 343 customers, 1 bowl of hot congee, 2 poached eggs. The starting point. Holden had written the label. He hadn't used data to describe that starting point. He had used her words. Kira looked out the window. Her speech in Vienna had been years ago now, but the words she'd spoken still lived inside her. The mud is not your destination. It is your foundation. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling window on the 38th floor. Behind her was the brand she had built. On her left ring finger was the ring forged from her mother's gold. Beside her stood the man who had turned all her scars into data. Below, the Bund teemed with people and traffic, each person walking their own road. She had once knelt in the mud. Now she stood in the light. Not by anyone's grace. She had walked every step herself. The gold wires that had snapped. The notebooks filled with ruined sketches. The pillows soaked with tears. The nights torn apart by pain. All of it had become the stairs beneath her feet. She looked down at her hands. The scar on the back of her right hand was still there. The scar across her left palm was still there. But they weren't called scars anymore. They were called trophies. Every single one.